We're just driving down the highway, slowly accelerating from 10 miles an hour up to the speed limit, which was 55. And we had a lot of interest. People were honking their horns. He goes, do you think it'll burn the building down? I said, well, no, I don't think so. But I said, the flames aren't that big. He goes, can you make them bigger? There's so much that you can do with fire. Your imagination's the only limiting factor.
Bob spent the first 20 years of his post-college life flying airplanes. He began by flying fighters in the military, followed by a 13-year stint as a commercial airline pilot. After 9/11, his career as a pilot changed drastically for the worse. Little did he know that after a few short years later, he would develop an electronic ignition system that would transform an industry. Imagine a system that makes fire on water possible. Welcome to Luxury Outdoor Living Podcast with Mike
and Trey Farley
of Farley Pool Designs. For over 40 years, we've helped homeowners turn their backyards into personal retreats. And that's why after decades of designing and teaching in this industry, we're here to share our knowledge, helping you navigate the process with confidence.
Every week we break down design, trends, and insider tips that turn your vision into reality. We'd love to have you along for the ride.
Let's build your paradise together. Good afternoon. Welcome to Luxury Outdoor Living. I'm Mike Farley.
And I'm Trey Farley.
And we're with Farley Pool Designs, and we're here to give you lots of information about fun things outside.
Yep, and this one's going to be really fun. It's probably going to be a fire episode.
Fiery, yes. So my favorite things, there was a question that was asked to me at the pool show was whether I liked fire or water, which was the better thing. And of course, I chose a fire water bowl so I could have both. But, you know, my superintendents are always joking when they first get a set of plans as they're curious on what kind of cool fire thing I've put into this particular project. So I didn't realize that until about a year ago that that was a thing. I guess I have a fire thing.
Yeah, hillsides are not just your niche. You got another one as well.
Yeah, I like to see things burn.
Oh, yeah.
So campfires, I love campfires, but, you know, those aren't real practical in most people's backyards with all the smoke and everything.
Yeah, not everybody wants a log wood to a fire pit. Well, so who are we talking to today?
Who are we talking to?
Yeah.
We're going to talk to Bob at Fire Design.
Perfect.
Fire by Design.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Fire by Design. Every time we go to a show, his stuff always stands out to me.
Well, it's really cool. Some of the things that they've done custom, and we'll have to check everything out that we're going to go through.
And it's not just the cool stuff. It's like he'll be like, oh, look at this, and he'll like go through every like mechanism and talk about every detail and stuff like that. He's very down to the nitty gritty about everything.
Well, he's built it all.
Mm-hmm. Smart guy.
Instead of buying components and using them. Anyway, we'll let him tell his story. So
let's go.
Well, Bob, welcome to Luxury Outdoor Living Podcast. Thank you for coming on with us today.
It's good to be here, Mike. Any chance I can get to share what we do and how we can improve upon a pool design using fire, I'm open to talk about it.
Well, again, thanks. And you have some really cool stuff. But before we jump into the features and everything, explain to us how did you end up in the luxury outdoor living industry?
It's kind of a interesting story. My background was flying airplanes. I was in the military, Air Force, flying fighters for a while, and then I got out of that and I got on with United. I was with them for 13 years. Oh, wow. So I spent 20 years flying airplanes. When I was a teenager, my stepdad was a carpenter, and I used to be involved in, used to be a helper. Some job sites I helped him framing, but I got exposed to a lot of trades because he was building homes in New Jersey where I grew up. And so I got a chance to work with electricians and plumbers and roofers and, whoever needed somebody, I was their guy. I loved learning. So after 9/11, I ended up not really liking the career any further. It really became arduous for me. And so I decided to uh, transition, if you will, to a remodel company. The first couple of years after 9/11 happened, I didn't fly much. I was a reserve pilot, so I had a lot of free time on my hands. And so I ended up starting to do little projects for neighbors. Everything in my own backyard, including my pool, I pretty much built. And so I had a lot of experience in that and other things. But then, and I actually built several pools as a owner builder consultant, not necessarily legal, but you do what you got to do to put food on the table, because after leaving United, trying to replace that income was difficult. But somewhere in there, a good friend of ours, she said, Bob, I want you to build a patio cover. I want to do this, that, but the other thing that I would like is a freestanding fireplace. I'd never built a fireplace, and all the fireplaces I ever saw were made out of brick or cinder block. But anyway, I built it like they built barbecue islands with steel, the steel stud construction, backer board, things like that. And it really turned out nice. She was thrilled with it. Her son graduated high school. They had about 200 guests at the graduation party, and I sold a couple more. So before long, I was in the fire pit fireplace business. I wasn't doing patio covers or tiled floors anymore, which I didn't miss any of that. And then I started playing around with electronics. I had a customer say, hey, I don't want to turn it on with a lighter. Is there any way I could do it with a remote? So that's when I started getting into remote control. I didn't know anything about it. I've had no experience really as in the gas world, but I ended up getting together with an engineer in Vegas who knew how to write code and build circuit boards. And I told him exactly how I wanted the system to perform. And I'd been in the business a couple of years up to this point. So I knew the challenges that rain and wind had on the existing systems. So I said I needed to be able to perform in 50-mile-an-hour winds, and I needed to handle torrential downpours without a problem.
Okay.
And so
where were you located when you were doing this?
I was in Las Vegas.
Okay,
My
so
first.
you were in the Vegas. Okay.
Yep. My first base of assignment was Nellis Air Force Base, which is in the northeast corner of the Vegas Valley. And so after moving around a little bit in the Air Force and then a little bit with United, I ended up coming back to Vegas in 92.
Okay.
And I've been there ever since. So, and it was a great proving grounds. We didn't have a lot of rain, but we had a lot of wind in the spring. And so I had a lot of experience. After I would install systems, I got to sit there and watch them. And oftentimes my favorite day to install was a windy day, because then it was better than using a fan in your shop or anything like that. You actually had real life conditions to test in. And then we used garden hoses to simulate rain. But for the most part, yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. Matter of fact, on our website, we have what we call our torture videos. You may have seen them, where we drive fire features in the back of a pickup truck through a car wash. Another, just to highlight how it handles a lot of water.
Okay.
And then
you got to explain that a little bit more for people that haven't experienced this video. So how
yeah,
are you
absolutely.
doing this?
Well, the fun part about that was, so I had a pickup truck, and I had elevated a bowl in the back of the truck for the previous video we shot, which was called the highway wind test. And I'll talk about that in a second. But so we had a bowl elevated. You could see the whole bowl when you're standing on the side of the truck. And then we also had a tiki torch. So the first video we did a highway wind test. We lit the features, and we're just driving down the highway, slowly accelerating from 10 miles an hour up to the speed limit, which was 55. And we had a lot of interest. People were honking their horns.
You're on fire.
Yeah, because there's fire. And meanwhile, I've got a guy in the back of the truck with the video camera. There was no phones with cameras at that time. We were just video camera. And he was videotaping, and then people are flashing with the brights and stuff. And at one point I said, I want to get a shot from the side of the road. So I pull over to let him jump out, and I'm going to do a U-turn and come around. Well, just as we pull over, this off-duty fireman pulls in behind us, jumps out of his car. He's got a fire extinguisher in his hand. He's ready to just destroy my whole setup. And I'm like, no, don't do that. And I hit the remote, and it turned the fire off. And you see that look in his face. He's like, I was going to save the day here. We totally removed. The look on his face was, he was so sad, and he goes, "Oh, okay. I thought your truck was really on fire." So he went back to his car, and we finished our video. But then, I got the idea. Let's do we'll go through a car wash, and we'll simulate the water thing, and it's kind of a fun thing. But we were having trouble finding a car wash owner that was willing to have us go through with fire.
I bet.
But then we met this guy. I don't even remember his name, but he was from New York, strong New York accent. And I said, "Hey, we're trying to shoot this video. We'd like to go through the car wash with the bowl of fire." And you could tell he's looking at me, and he goes, "Do you think it'll burn the building down?" I said, "Well, no, I don't think so." But I said, "The flames aren't that big." He goes, "Can you make them bigger?"
He needs an insurance claim.
"I have insurance." And he wanted that building to burn down. So I said, "No, I don't think we're going to catch anything on fire." And he goes, "Okay." So we scheduled a day. When I get there with the truck ready to shoot the video, he's got 20 people lined up, just standing there looking around, because he wanted witnesses. If in case the building burned down, he wanted to have plenty of witnesses to see that it burned down, other than himself. So we shot the video. It didn't burn down.
Poor guy.
But yeah, he was hoping that it would burn down. But it was a fun video to shoot, and we've done probably about a half a dozen of them. I think only 4 of them are up on our website. Some of them didn't pan out the way we had hoped. But what we were trying to do, and I think we accomplished it, was show that our system can handle high winds, lots of water. It can actually handle being submersed. There's one of the videos is a submersion test. And in the other video, we had people from like Canada saying, "Yeah, but can it handle really cold? Like if I don't use it in the wintertime, what's going to happen in the spring? Will it light up?" And so what we did was we froze our ignition system in this plastic, like it was something you use to cover a cake. And so, but we made a hole and we sealed it, and then we put water in it, and we froze it over a 3-day period in a freezer. And it's called the freeze test. And we ended up setting it up on a gas line, and we're videotaping it. And we turned it on, and it came on right away. So, and again, they're fun videos, not necessarily realistic, but they get the point across.
Yeah, you ought to put all those on YouTube.
I want to say that the videos are on YouTube and on our website. I think the videos on our website link to YouTube.
Oh, perfect. So we'll have to go look for those.
And I can get you links to it if you need.
Yeah.
If you'd like to see them.
Oh, most definitely. So those are all fun things to test things out, and much better than, just the wind in the backyard. So.
Yep. And it's funny, still today, like, at the show where we met, I have, we do show some of the videos on a loop on a monitor at our booth, and you'll get people that come by and say, "Oh man, you got to watch this video. This is awesome." Still, and we posted those back in 2010, and people still recognize them and refer people to them. So they were an effective thing that, think about it. 2010 was a couple of years after the real estate market did what it did. We were still growing, and those videos really gave us a bump. Once people saw that we had the first ever system truly meant to handle the outdoor weather, that phone started ringing, the emails started coming in, and it was really, really kind of uplifting to see the effect that those videos had. So
I'm curious, those videos are awesome, and I'm sure if they're on YouTube, they performed really well, or they should have. But the whole concept of the wind, because I was in the back end of construction for a little bit, and I had to deal with, you know, the punch list and making sure that bowls were working. And I know that a lot of homeowners that just buy some random bowl. I'm not going to say any names or anything like that, but you know, just the wind in general. Why? Because there's so many components to a fire feature working. You have the gas pressure, you have the modules, you have regulators sometimes, you know, the sensors. So why do fire features fail, and why are your products just better?
So when I first started out, I was using similar components that a lot of other companies are still using.
Yeah.
Mainly the controller. The controller is the circuit board that brings it, you know, it when you supply power to the system, it's what opens up the gas valve. It starts the ignition, but it also is getting an input from a sensor to make sure is the flame on. Because if the flame is not on, it's supposed to shut off. Well, every controller that's out there for indoor furnaces, things like that, or hot water heaters, and within their program, the code says that they have to have what's called a flame failure response time, which what that means is when the flame goes out, how much time is allowed before the valve has to be shut down. Well, in a furnace or a hot water heater, it's a very confined space, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be pretty quick.
Right.
So if the flame goes out, that gas valve better turn off really quick or you're going to get a buildup of gas.
Mm-hmm.
That time frame is 0.08 seconds.
Oh, wow.
That's less than a second.
Yeah.
So within a second, boom. Well, imagine when it's windy outside and you're using that same controller. What happens when it gets windy? Well, the flame moves away from the sensor and then it'll come back and move away. But what if it stays away for more than 0.08 seconds? It shuts down.
Yeah. It's gonna go
And
down.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
It shuts down, it'll relight, but it's constantly doing what we call cycling.
Mm-hmm.
So when I developed our controller, I knew I had all the ventilation in the world. Literally, we're outside. We've got all this ventilation. And when I got involved in the industry, there was no code yet for outdoor fire features. The initial code that they wrote, they said, well, let's do what we do on the inside, 0.08 seconds. Well, when that code came out, I started making phone calls and sending emails to say, no, this doesn't make sense for the outdoors because we don't have a little confined space.
Right.
So ultimately, it took about 3 years, but we got the code changed to where now it's 90 seconds. 90 seconds flame failure response time for the outdoors. Well, when we developed our controller, we didn't go for 90 seconds, but we figured out through a lot of testing and charting of data and whatnot that if we had no flame within this period of time, anywhere from 4 to 8 seconds, we knew that the flame was out, and then we would shut it down. But having that longer interval, 4 to 8 seconds versus 0.08 seconds, when the flame's doing this and it's going back and forth, and let's say this is the sensor, and your flame is doing this because of the wind, as long as it touches it every once in a while within that 4 to 8 second window, it knows there's a flame and it stays on.
Is it any different?
Nobody else has that.
Gotcha. That's a really cool feature because yes, we've all experienced the click.
Oh yeah, when we're at photo shoots and we hear the firebolts clicking, we're like, oh gosh, here we go.
Is it different or is there a different setting for propane or gas? I'm just curious because those medias are a little different in how they react.
There is a difference, but the difference really is not in the program per se, but it's in what's called the orifice. All gas appliances have an orifice. An orifice is a small hole in a fitting to allow a certain amount of gas through. Generally speaking, natural gas is about 1/4 psi. Propane gas is a little bit higher at 1/3 psi. Not a lot, not a lot more pressure, but more. And so when you are dealing with propane, you want to have a smaller orifice because of the higher pressure. The smaller orifice lets less volume,
Right.
but it's really the same amount of volume just because of the higher pressure. But as far as the program goes, it operates exactly the same.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm wondering, because when I was in the field, I remember talking to other PMs and supers on jobs, and a lot of them would like the manual fire pits just because they think they would have less issues. Is that like a myth or anything, or is there something that goes with, you know, people having issues with the fire feature being automatic versus manual? Is there any benefit there? Or
When we first got started, again, I'm not going to name names,
yeah,
but all the companies that were offering systems were using those controllers that are meant for indoors.
okay,
The other thing that wasn't considered was what happens to the hardware when it rains? Is water going to get in the gas line one way or the other?
Oh yeah.
And it's, you know, and that right there. So you got the quick flame failure response time coupled with hardware that really wasn't designed well to keep the water out. So when we designed our system starting in 2009 and finishing in 2010, I wanted our system to be able to be submersed, and then once the water drained, it could still work. That created a challenge. How do you let gas out but keep water out as well? You let gas out, but the water can't go in. And so a lot of the design there just had to do with the hardware. So our pilot burner is nothing like anybody else's out there because our pilot burner design is such that water can't get in there. And just so you know, my background in college was aerospace engineering. And so that helped me as I was designing this. You look at it, you go, okay, well, tensile strength of water. What size opening can I get away with and let gas out and water not come in? Well, and then if water gets in, where does it have a place to go to other than down the gas line? And so that's the design of our pilot burner is such that water will get in there, but as soon as the water subsides, it drains out, but it doesn't go into the gas line. So when you have when you had all of these problems beforehand, yeah, if it rained, you had to drain it somehow. Nobody wants to do that. And if it was windy, it would cycle. So that was the belief that everybody had was automated fire features are not reliable, and they weren't. And I wouldn't have put one in myself until, you know, and just so that you know, every fire feature, every automated system that we've ever developed, the first one always went into my fire pit. And I would use it in my fire pit and beat it up with leaf blowers if it wasn't windy, or garden hoses, or douse a 5-gallon bucket of water on it in order to determine, is this new design better than the last or not? So, you know, you can test in a lab all day long, but you really don't get the full effect unless you're testing in a fire feature with lava rock and all of the elements of weather beating it up. And, you know, in Vegas, I know we don't get a lot of rain, but we do get 115, 120. And, you know, that'll defeat electronics, you know, just as easily as anything else. But,
Certainly.
you know, so that testing helps.
another element that you kind of touched on there for a second is the media that goes on top of the bowl. And I know, like in the design aspect of fire features, people want to have a very reflective surface to help it shine the fire off and stuff like that. But the shattered or the glass itself in the field would always like clog into some of the modules and the components. And obviously, if yours is watertight, then I'm assuming that, you know, glass media would be no issue either.
You know, it's funny about fiberglass. As it became more popular, more manufacturers got involved and said, "Oh, I could sell fiberglass." And I've seen glass that I don't know what it's made of, but I don't think it's really fire, or it's not really glass,
Yeah.
because I've gone out, because I used to do all the installs in Vegas for many years, and I would see the glass melted
Oh wow.
on to things. But then you had the better fiberglass, the better manufacturers, and you never saw that. Our pilot burner and a lot of pilot burners today have a cage around the pilot burner. Flame needs oxygen. So when you're covering, fiberglass is the worst as far as suffocating the flame.
Yeah.
So what you want to do, and it shows clearly in our install instructions with pictures, you want to have about the very top of the cage, you want about 50% coverage at the most. If you really try to bury it, you're just not going to get oxygen. It's not going to work. But other than that, and then you asked about propane earlier, Mike. When it comes to, so propane is heavier than air.
100%.
Natural gas is lighter. So when you're using fiberglass on a fire feature that has propane, you want to put the bare minimum of media over the burner and the pilot burner, because otherwise that gas will come out, it'll hit the glass if you got an inch thick layer and go right back down, and now it becomes a hazard because it's lurking within the glass. Yep, and you get that sound. Yeah, and not so much a boom, but it definitely will get your attention.
So
we've had people, get scared over it.
We don't use glass with propane is just our standard policy, is just because people will do the wrong thing and then stuff happens. So we just use tumbled lava rock or the spheres with propane, so then we don't have an issue of the propane settling or being held under a blanket. Good advice. Keep it to a minimum. So at least
you do a lot of custom work, and I think that's what separates yourself, not just by the standards you hold yourself to, but the amount of custom work is crazy. But since we're on the topic of like the flame being suffocated, I'm just kind of curious. There's one, I think it's custom. It's the magma rock feature, and it almost looks like lava's like oozing down a mountain in a way, but it's like a fire pit. Was that, how'd you not suffocate with the flame there? Because I can't even see the unit itself, which I love.
When we, in the early days of the volcanoes, you had just the fire, but then we started to incorporate LED lighting. It's funny how LED lighting, you can get the LED. It looks like lava flowing.
Yeah.
It gives it a sense of it's moving. So you have this flame, and then we went to lighting experts to say, this is what we want to create. However, it's fire, it's got heat to it. How do we protect the LED lighting in its sleeve? And they got real creative with that kind of stuff. But when you're doing volcanoes, which we've done quite a few volcanoes over the years, usually you're going to have your fire start up top. And then it's going to feed, the flame will catch on the burners going down through the different lava flows, if you will. And then in some of the volcanoes, like I said, we incorporated LED lighting to give you that effect that something is moving slowly down the volcano, i.e. a lava flow. And you don't really, in a lot of those instances, we just, like you said, Mike, earlier, we just like not the rolled lava stone. We like the jagged stuff because it's more realistic, if you will, for a volcano. It's nothing going to be rolled. It's going to be jagged and
right.
And so you're not going to get much suffocation because there's a lot of, first of all, it's igneous rock, which means it's got a lot of air pockets to it. And the way it sits together, because it's jagged, you got a lot of air pockets between them. So you're not going to suffocate in that instance.
Okay. That's cool how you use the illusion effect too. The customer sees fire at the top and maybe feathers down, and then they still see the red at the bottom, and it's like, oh, that's still fire.
So are these done on the resorts there in Vegas, or did you do any in residential settings? Just curious.
No, it's funny. No, they do them in the resorts of Las Vegas. We don't do that. So any more fire by design, I got away from the install stuff. Mainly, I didn't have a contractor's license to do it, didn't want one. So we work with companies in Vegas who do the installs, and we help them with the design work. So they're handling that. When it comes to your commercial or your residential, rather, we work with a lot of local pool builders, and we'll help them design, the features. And yeah, you'd be surprised. I was shocked. And Vegas is like any place, has gobs and gobs of money. People who they're trying to figure out, how do I make mine the coolest in the neighborhood?
Of course.
And when they see one, they go, can you make it bigger than that? Yes, we can. And that's the mentality of the Joneses. We want to outdo the Joneses.
Yeah.
So, but no, we've had some really cool residential stuff. Some right now in New Jersey, there's a bronze statue of a dragon standing on a sphere, which is the Earth, and it stands. It's either 14 or 16 feet tall, and it's also on our website. It's a fire-breathing dragon. So the artist reached out to us several years ago, and we got the dimensions of the mouth. And so we replicated the size of the mouth using just a 3/8 rebar. And then we developed a burner system that could fit in there and attach, if you will, and then we created a program to where this thing spews fire, but it doesn't just do it. It's in intervals. Like it might spew for a second, be off for 2, spew for 3 seconds, be off for 1, and we call it the Dragon program. Anyway, so we did that. It was installed. We get a call from the electrical company or somebody, and they said, hey, this guy's got a long driveway. When he enters the driveway and he's driving up the driveway, he wants to see the dragon on, breathing fire as he's coming home. And so we use the motion sensor. Somebody pulls through the gate. It sends a signal. There's a time delay. And before you know it, the dragon's breathing fire for about 10 minutes, and then it goes off. So and we've done about a half a dozen of those as well in different parts of the country.
Sweet.
That's a good cue for his wife. Oh, he's home. The dragon's breathing fire.
Exactly.
You were born in Jersey?
I was actually born in Staten Island. Lived there till I was like 5 or 6, and then my folks decided to move to the suburbs. I grew up in Hazlet, New Jersey. It's a lot of people know Homedale or Keyport, but yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, very close, just due south of the city. So when we would go to the beach in Union Beach on a clear day, you could look across and see the Verrazano Bridge and the city, the towers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Point Pleasant, Tom's River.
Oh, okay. Tom's River, Point Pleasant. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Seaside Heights.
Oh yeah.
So
that was a favorite spot when you were a kid, the roller coaster and the boardwalk.
Oh yeah. So
love that place.
I was born on the bay in Point Pleasant and grew up in Tom's River and hung out in Seaside Heights, for the first 12 years. And then I moved to West Texas.
Okay.
That was culture shock in the 70s. So.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I moved. I know my senior year of high school, I finished up in Prescott, Arizona. My dad had a lot of issues with his sinuses and humidity, and said, "Let's move to Prescott, Arizona." And we didn't know anybody there. I don't know what they found. I don't know if he threw a dart at a map, but you talk about culture shock going from where I was to in those days, Prescott was like a cow town.
Yeah.
I'm sure Texas was similar.
Well, Lubbock, Texas was certainly, it would be about like Prescott, Arizona. So, but anyway, I just was curious.
A lot of similarities. And I'm just wondering, so with your product, and I know it's like, we're talking about it being great for outside and the benefits of that and the flexibility of it and everything like that. Do you use your product indoors? Because I'm sure there's someone like that sees your custom work and is like, man, I want to have this somewhere in my house somewhere.
We do offer indoor features. However, that flame failure response time we were talking about earlier,
Yep.
in before the ignition system we offer now, the all-weather electronic ignition system, I worked a lot with the Honeywell Smart Valve. And what I liked about the Honeywell Smart Valve, a couple of things, very compact, but it really was kind of it. When I designed our system that we have, I fashioned it, the size of it and the makeup of it after the Honeywell Smart Valve. So we still, if someone wants an indoor custom feature, we'll do it, but we'll use the Honeywell Smart Valve.
Okay. And you don't have to
For
think
that.
about the wind and the rain when you're indoors. So that's,
Exactly.
yeah.
You don't have to think about any of those things,
Hope
but
not.
Yeah.
you have to think about, you have to think about that flame failure response time.
Okay.
That's the biggie.
So the concept of there's a on your website, there's a sphere that's surrounded by flames, and it looks like the flames are coming up through the water.
The Bernie ball?
The Bernie ball.
I think it's the Bernie ball.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the flames are coming up through the water.
okay, so it is really coming up through the water. So that because your valve allows it to work in conjunction with water. So, is there anything special you have to do to make that work?
So the way the system works is you have every fire feature, automated fire feature has what the first thing is called a pilot burner, rather small. It's the first thing that gets ignited. Inside there is the sensor, the igniter, and a place for the gas to come out. That always and a fire on water feature where the gas bubbles up through the water. You have to have the pilot burner above the water. Now, it's small. It's 2 inches in diameter. It's round. It's 2 inches in diameter and inch and 5/8 tall. That part sticks up out of the water. So the Bernie ball, we actually put the pilot burner on the back of the acrylic sphere so that when they were sitting on their patio looking out over LA and Beverly Hills and all of that, they didn't see that pilot burner. So in this case, we hid it behind the acrylic sphere. Below that, in the water submerged, is the submersible manifold. And all it is it's tube. It's 316 stainless, the marine grade stainless, with tiny holes in it that face down. So when you turn the system on, initially you get the flame in the pilot burner. That signal from the sensor goes to the box, which oftentimes is also submerged in the water. And then it opens up the main valve, and now you have gas coming out of the tiny holes of the main burner, in this case, the acrylic sphere. The interesting thing about that feature, acrylic burns. It burns really good. So we had to design the plumbing. So that sphere is not full of water all the time. When the feature is turned on, a pump comes on and it starts to fill up the sphere. Well, when we timed it, it was about 45 seconds to fill up that thing with the pump they had. And so what we had to do was we had to put a flow meter on the line, and we knew that if it, based on the flow, whatever flow it was, we knew how much time it would take to fill up the sphere. But if there was no flow, we knew the power was applied, but the pump was broken. So that would be another way to burn the sphere. So there was some things there with the water that we had to tackle first. And so bottom line is the flow meter measures the flow. We have a table that says it's going to take this long to fill the sphere. And then we add 10 seconds on top of that, and then the fire portion comes on. So again, like the fire-breathing dragon, there's a timed circuit. And it sounds complex, but it really is pretty simple stuff.
So if the pump, say, is broken and the flow doesn't work, does that pretty much communicate to the burner, hey, we're not going today?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. We had to have a minimum flow rate in order to give the go signal.
Okay.
So if a pump is going out, you know it. it may not just not come on, it may just be reduced. So the fear there is the pump going out altogether somewhere in the middle of the operation. So we knew that this pump should be running at, let's say, 4,500 RPM or whatever the case, and it was actually a flow rate. It should be delivering this much water. If it was less than, I think, 20% of that, we feared that the pump would be going out, and so we wouldn't even turn it on. So again, probably too conservative for Bernie. Bernie had money to burn. So he didn't care about the cost of an acrylic sphere, but I do. So I said, no, we're going to design it this way. I never want you to send me a picture of a sphere that now looks like a blob, of acrylic in the bottom of your feature.
I'm wondering, with the Bernie ball, and you said the pilot light was behind it. Is there any way to have it, like, have the ball actually have an opening at the bottom and set it on top of it, and have the pilot light just be in the middle and poke a hole in the top of it so that it doesn't suffocate it?
In this case, the fire was outside the sphere, and the sphere was filled with water, and the water would cascade around it. So you couldn't really put your pilot burner interior to the sphere because it was going to fill up with water.
Okay.
But cool. His creative mind is trying to come up with solutions, so as all designers do.
Yeah. It's such a cool piece.
That's and that's what's fun about it. Like you said, we do a lot of custom, and that's a lot of fun for us, for me particularly, because I don't do the day-to-day stuff. I get involved in all the custom stuff. And like the very first time we had somebody ask us about an eternal flame feature. It burns 365 days a year, 24/7. And I want to say it was in Missouri or someplace that gets a lot of rain. Well, the way our system works is if you get a heavy downpour, it could cause the system to shut down. Now, the system will light up again, but it'll only light up 10 times in a 2-hour window. Don't ask me where we got that, but we basically said, if this thing's shut off 10 times in a 2-hour window, it's pretty heavy rain. So let's not even deal with it. Let's just shut it off and let the homeowner turn it off and back on when they want to use it, because that's how. So once it goes through that 10, it goes into what's lockout. It's called lockout. And the only way to get it to come back on again is cycle the power. Well, on eternal flame features, there's nobody there monitoring it. And so we ended up developing an electrical circuit that does that very thing. So that, because on the eternal flame features, the biggest complaint we got on the first one was, well, it works great. And then if we have a long rain, an hour's worth of rain, then when we go out there, it's off. So I thought, okay, how do we do this? And how do we cycle power? So we ended up developing an electrical circuit that does that. It acts as though it's the homeowner saying, well, it went off, it's 10 times. Now we're going to turn the power off and back on. And it works great. Now we've got probably, I don't know, a few dozen eternal flame features across the country, veterans, memorials, things like that. And we don't get that complaint anymore now that we've developed that circuit. So that was it's a fun, challenging thing to come up against it. And it's great when you figure out a solution.
So you have, I'm assuming that you have the standard fire bowls and different sizes and shapes and colors and materials and that type of thing that you can put the fire into, or do you just provide the mechanical parts?
No, we in-house, we have a line of metal bowls, copper. There's copper bowls. There's stainless steel bowls that are considered, they're not marine grade, they're 304. We use those when somebody wants their bowls colored, and by that I mean powder coated. So we'll use the 304 stainless for that. If somebody likes the stainless finish and they want it to just be stainless, then we use the marine grade or 316 stainless. When it comes to concrete bowls, the industry standard anymore is they're called GFRC bowls. And what that stands for is glass fiber reinforced concrete. Well, normal concrete has aggregate, little stones in it. your sidewalks, things like that, patios
Right.
and what. It's very strong, but it's very heavy. So what they do on these concrete bowls is they remove those stones, what they refer to as aggregate, and they replace it with fiberglass fibers
Mm.
because fiberglass is also very strong. So, and the nice thing about fiberglass is it's far lighter than that aggregate, those stones. So we work with other manufacturers. We work with 3 different manufacturers because they offer different styles. All of those are shown on our website. Some people like concrete, some people like metal. It's just whatever your personal preference is.
Right.
The nice thing about the metal bowls is they're far lighter, so your shipping costs aren't as high. However, those metals are more expensive than concrete. So what you save in freight, you're going to pay for in material costs. So
They're somewhat close to the same price.
yeah, it works out to they're pretty close.
So do those bowls, can you do custom sizes as well? Like get them really, really big?
Oh yeah, we have our standard sizes, but we do again we do a lot of custom. Some of the stuff, we also our capabilities for metal in house is limited. We do the standard stuff. The nice thing about being in Las Vegas with all these casinos is you have some amazing metal shops here. So there's a handful that we work with. Some are better at some things than others. We've had some really cool projects where we had to go outside and outsource it. We do the design work. We'll work with the pool designer or whomever the customer is working with, and then we'll take those drawings and go farm it out to the metal shops in Vegas, and that's worked out really well for us.
So, any crazy things you've manufactured out of metal and put fire into?
Yeah, we had a really cool project. It was in Texas. They had it was a stone wall. I'm going to say 15 feet or something like that wide by maybe 6 foot tall. And they wanted a burner pan that was like an S shape, kind of like that went the length of the wall. So this was a burner pan, and then and so water came down the wall, and they wanted this suspended off the wall.
Oh, wow.
And basically they had wanted this line of flame in front of this wall, and it had really cool LED lighting illuminating the wall. Really, really turned out beautiful. That was a fun project because the challenge there is we had to work with their structural guys to figure out how it was going to mount. And then we put it all together like these, it basically slid onto these posts that were coming out of the wall. We had never built anything quite like this before. It was challenging. The first pan we made out of some just mild steel or whatever before we went to the hammered stainless. That was the other thing. It was hammered stainless. It was beautiful because the light off of hammered stainless just dazzles. But that was a really, really cool project. And then we've done, another cool feature, not a bowl or anything like that, but in Costa Rica, there's a Four Seasons on the west coast there where they have an island in the middle of the Four Seasons with a moat around it. And they've got palm trees and all this stuff on the island. And it's 50 foot in diameter, which is about 150 foot or so circumference. And we did 6 fire on the water features within that moat. And that picture's on our website. That was a really cool project as well because we had never done a fire on water that big up to that point. So
Spectacular.
yeah, the fire on water is it's like mesmerizing. People look at it like in Vegas, there's 9 of them in the water by Red Rock Casino. They have fountains in the front of the casino, and each one of them has 2 or 3 fire on water features in those fountains.
I always wondered, and I'm sure you know the trick behind this, but on the I think it was a Morse job, and you could bleep out the name. Sorry about that, but there's this huge fire pit, and it's steel, right? It's like Corton steel, and
Yes.
if you touch it, it's not hot. It's not that, and it's this huge burner. So I'm just wondering, how do you get that effect? Maybe a homeowner wants something like that without.
The burner is only about 36, maybe 42 inches.
Okay.
But the bowl is
it's massive.
It's like 7 feet. And so there was a lot of media around the perimeter of the fire. So,
the media dispersing versus
that's
the fire.
That's how we did it on that.
Okay.
But
you might have
Bob may have other ideas.
The key in most features is the clearance between the burner and, like you just said, Mike, the distance between the vessel, in this case, the Corten steel bowl, and the burner. If you get that burner within 3 inches of the bowl, it's going to get hot.
Okay.
We have found that if we maintain at least a minimum clearance of 6 inches, we're good. But the other thing too is, we had an interesting job. Another company that sells fire, they sold it somewhere in Florida, Boca Raton, Florida, some polo club or something. They had 3 features in the middle of the pool, like spread out. And they supplied everything, the bowls, the ignition systems, the burners, and they burned up, I want to say 9 systems, 3 in each bowl. Each one lasted about a week.
Ooh.
And it turned out it was due to heat. And so that was an interesting job, because they basically threw their hands up and they said, well, we don't know how to fix this, but we know a company that probably can fix it. And so they put us in touch with them, and we were able to fix it. But it was interesting in that the burner was very close to the vessel. It was oversized for the feature. And so my first suggestion was, well, let's go with a smaller burner. It'll be fine. No, the owners don't want to do that. Okay. So we ended up we changed the design of the burner pan. It had really good ventilation from below the bowl. The bowl was elevated off a pedestal, and it had like little feet, if you will.
Right.
And there was a big opening in here, so air could get in. The problem was the burner pan that they had in there, it had no holes, no nothing. So basically it was cooking the ignition system. So I redesigned the pan to allow for a lot of airflow through the media,
Right.
but yet keep and it was standard lava rock, but small enough. So basically it was large perforated holes that we used in this pan, and it fixed it. We put our ignition system in, I want to say it was back in 2016 or something. And the first time they ever called us to replace any components was like 6 years later. They needed new pilot burners. But just by doing, and the other thing that did was they noticed that it brought the flame up a lot higher. Because what happens, you get that chimney effect. That air is pulling from the bottom, goes right through this pan. And as the media heats up, you've got your heat that's going upwards. So the flames initially might be 12 to 18 inches, but then they grow to 24 to 30 inches because of the chimney effect. So they really like the design, and that builder still orders from us today for all of their commercial jobs.
That's cool. I'm wondering, in a job that we have a backyard, and say we have like 5 different fire features, like 3 bowls, a fire pit, and something else. Would you recommend? Would you recommend putting a regulator on every single fire feature? Because also it's not just about like from what my experience, it doesn't seem just to be about the components. It's about, the gas pressure and, how long the runs are, stuff like that, getting enough gas to everything evenly. So.
There's a couple of ways to handle gas volume. One is, most residences that are maybe 7,000 feet or less in square footage, they're going to have that standard low pressure for residential, which is about quarter PSI. Once you get into the bigger homes, now you're looking at 2 PSI. That's the next step up. The problem with the if you have 5 fire features, you got a pool heater, maybe a barbecue island back there. Yeah, you're gobbling up gas. And if everything is done at the low pressure, your gas lines are going to get awfully big. So one of the things that we help pool builders with is, so if you have, except for the state of California, if you have low pressure, residential pressure, you can apply for medium, what's called medium pressure. That's that 2 PSI. Because oftentimes your gas meter is going to be on the side of the house, close to the front of the house. Why? So that they can read the meter pretty easy.
Right.
So you might have a house that's 50, 75 feet deep. I don't know. You got to run all that distance using big gas line to feed all of those. And then you start branching off to the different areas. But if you can get your system upgraded to 2 PSI, the medium pressure, now you can get away with a lot smaller line. And now when you start looking at the backyard, you go, okay, somewhere in here, we do want to downsize the pressure. Where's that central location? Where's that place where we might be able to have a manifold and a regulator, one regulator? So you bring your 2 PSI to that point, you put the regulator on, and from there you go to your different appliances. And that's how, propane guys are real good at this. Because propane, what's nice about propane is when it comes out of that first stage regulator, there's 2 regulators. First stage regulator, it's 10 PSI. You can do a lot of damage with 10 PSI. And you can use very small gas lines when you're dealing with propane. And they'll do that. They'll run it as far as they can, and then they put what's called the second stage regulator, which knocks it down to whatever the desired pressure they want. And then you still might have to upsize your gas lines, but it's not as bad because you've already eaten up a lot of the distance between your propane tank or your meter to the backyard.
That's great information because, when you design a pool or a luxury backyard, some people might not think about these things and how the actual gas lines are going to be run. Make sure that the thing you design is actually buildable. So thank you.
You're exactly right. Particularly, your less experienced pool builders, they're relying on their plumber to tell them what needs to happen. I'm surprised how many plumbers we have to tell how to plumb it to save money for the customer, bottom line. Because if you're running a 3-inch gas line versus a 1-inch gas line,
whoa,
the expense is significant.
You have Tiki torches as well.
Yeah.
From a feature standpoint. So what are those made out of?
We have several different styles. We have some are cone Tiki torches. You've got cones that are made from copper, spun copper, and then others that are made from aluminum. The aluminum ones, we put a high heat powder coat on them so that they'll not peel away when the flame's going. So you've got aluminum, copper on the cones. Those are the most popular sellers. We also offer others that are stainless steel, or what they call our Malamai series. And then we have others that are made from cast iron. And we get them from different. So what we do is we buy the components from different suppliers, and then we add our automation to it. In all of our Tiki torches, we have what we call the neck of the torch. It's a 3-inch in diameter cylinder by 4 inches tall. Our entire system fits inside that small area. Wow. And then from there, you go up to with your igniter and your sensors and things like that. So you'll have what looks like a pilot burner either at the top of the Tiki cone or on some of the others just within the feature. But yeah, our and I was talking earlier how we developed our own controller. Our controller is only about 2¼ inches long by 1 inch wide. By comparison, we were talking about some of the other controllers that are out there that are being used on features. The Honeywell controller is about 4 inches wide by 6 inches long. So we could fit quite a few of ours to sit on top of one of those controllers. And what that does for us is it allows us to miniaturize everything and make it look good to where you can't see it.
Right.
Because nobody wants to look at that stuff.
No, y'all's looks really sleek, and I like how the cone is kind of flipped on its head. It's cool. So,
any other features or projects you'd like to highlight from that shows your product well?
The one system that I've worked far too long on, but we have finally gotten it to the certification point, it's going through testing right now, is our battery powered ignition system. When I was doing installs back in Vegas, I would sometimes I would be at a pool doing new construction. And the new construction was great because you had your conduit in there, you had your gas in there, everything was planned. A neighbor might look across and say, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" "Oh, look, we're installing fire bowls." And they're like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." They said, "I have a couple of fire bowls on my pool, but I never use them." I'm like, "Well, why don't you use them?" "Well, I just got tired of walking out there and turning the gas on and lighting them by hand. I just don't like doing it anymore, so I don't use them." So it got me thinking, and the remodel market is very active right now, and so there's a lot of
huge.
fire bowls.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's a lot of fire bowls out there right now that have gas, but they don't have any electric. And if you wanted to run electric, you'd have to tear up the decking to do it. It's very costly to do it. So we developed a battery powered ignition system. It operates exactly like our standard ignition system, only it uses 3 AA batteries. It's a different valve, but it's also Bluetooth. And we have an app called Firetronics. You could go to the App Store today or the Google Play Store and look up Firetronics, and you'll see our app there. So with this system, you could take 2 fire bowls that are just have gas and they have no electric. You would install them in the bowls. You have the app. Before you install them, you would pair to them. And then if you want to turn on your fire bowls, you just open up the Firetronics app. You can hit on, or you could say, "Hey, I want it on for 30 minutes. I want it on for an hour." There's a timer mode. If you had 4 fire bowls, you could, instead of hitting each one to say turn on, turn on, turn on, you just after you've paired to them, you say all on, all off. And then if you set a timer, it'll apply to all 4. You can have unlimited number of fire features that are battery powered in your backyard and still control it through the same app. We're really excited because it's starting to gain traction in the remodel market, those that know about it. Matter of fact, the first place we introduced it was at the show in Dallas.
wow.
So when people saw it and I mentioned remodel, that's what this is for. Then all of a sudden the light went on and I went, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." Because otherwise you're not going to run conduit.
No. Well, most people don't realize, 20 years ago, there weren't fire bowls. I mean,
Exactly.
This is something that's fairly new, but there is an aging. I mean, there's some that are out there that are starting to get old. So, and that didn't have, or, you sold to one homeowner that was fine with turning it on manually. And now the new homeowner comes in and he hates it. He wants to turn it on automatically, so this would be a perfect situation for somebody that moves in, that they could modify the system as well.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, matter of fact, they just put, I think I was telling you, we downsized and bought a new place, and the fire pit there is a manual light fire pit, and there's no way I can run conduit to it. So I haven't done it quite yet. I've been moving in, but my intention is to put one of our battery powered AWS's in there so I could turn it on with my phone.
That's a cool feature. Yes, I will let a couple people know about that, so they'll like that.
Yeah, and like I said, it's going through certification now. Probably it takes about 2 months to get through certification, and then we're gonna let the world know.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I actually did remember. So with the earlier what I forgot. So with the Tiki torches, do y'all take that same technology and do it that in lanterns? Do y'all do lanterns at all?
You know, we one of the most popular torches out there is a lantern. It's called a Tempest torch. You probably have heard about it. There's a lot of them out there. Anyway, we had a custom, but so the Tempest torch is put out by a company, Travis Industries. They put out amazing products, mostly fireplaces. They make the biggest fireplaces I've ever seen. They're what you see in the resorts in Vegas. But anyway, they designed this torch, this great torch. The problem was the automation on it was housed in a junction box that was 10 inches by 10 inches by 6 inches deep.
Hmm.
And it had to be located within 6 feet of the igniter.
Oh, wow.
So if you wanted to have a Tempest torch on a pole, at the base of the pole, you had to have something to hide this junction box. And it was unsightly, to say the least. Well, we had one of our customers, they do a lot of business with us, and they said, Bob, this guy wants 36 of these Tempest torches. He goes, that means I got to put 36 boxes on the ground. Is there anything that you can do? And I had never worked with lanterns. So I ordered one, got it in, and immediately we looked at it and we go, we can use the same cylinder, that 3x4 cylinder that we use on our Tiki torches, just plug it in here, make the burner like that. And I said, it's done. And we did. I think I had it together in a day. And I took some pictures and video, and I sent it to the customer. I said, what do you think of this? He goes, that's perfect. So then I thought, I wonder if the company that sells these or makes these, if they'd be interested. And sure enough, I called them up and I said, hey, they're up in Seattle. I said, hey, I've done something with your Tempest torch. I think you might be interested in it. And they're looking at me like, you're really kind of bothering us right now. I said, well, that's fine. I'll send it to you. If you don't want it, that's fine. And sure enough, I sent video and pics. Within 30 minutes, I got a call back and they said, this is amazing. And it was kind of cool because, and then so he said, well, can you ship that to us? I said, well, yeah, but I'm selling it to you because I just bought it to figure out how to do this. So anyway, we exchanged, I sent him an invoice, we shipped it up, and I think it was like for 3 or 4 years, they bought just controllers from us because their metal fab capability is far more than what we have. But I sold them controllers, thousands and thousands of controllers. And then finally their engineers one day said, we could probably make something similar that'll work. And they developed their own controller specific to the Tempest torch, which was fine, you know. But it was kind of cool because it still is the top selling torch. As far as other lanterns, I've had people come to me and ask me, to develop. I did a couple of jobs in Massachusetts, but not a lot. There is a market for it, and maybe one of these days I'll go after that market. There are a couple of companies that we buy other things from that are in the lantern business. I've just never really pursued it.
Okay. Is there any other fire features that we haven't covered that y'all do that are just spectacular?
Probably one of the ones that people really like, people love putting the rocks, be it the faux rock or the real stone and waterfalls and all that. Rather than having just a bowl that you have to look at, they like the fire coming right out of the rocks like it was some sort of caveman days type look.
Right.
You don't see any vessel. You just see fire coming out of the rocks. And so we have what we call our Vulcan. It's a cylinder feature. It's 7 inches tall. Got a burner. That same cylinder that we use on Tiki torches, all the components in there. And it screws in just like a light bulb. You'd screw it onto a gas line, make your gas connections, and boom, you're done. And you don't need much room. You need maybe about 10 or 12 inches. So if you stack your stones, so there's a little gap between them. And, we've got some really cool looking ones. That's a fun feature because again, you're not looking at any bowls or anything like that. You just turn it on and it looks like, oh, this is like almost like a volcano. You got fire just coming out of different places. We've had we've had people do what they call a fire garden, where they have maybe a kidney shaped area where they might have some plants on the outside, and then they have set some boulders somewhere on the inside, and then they run burners between the boulders, not near the plants, but just kind of in a serpentine shape. And in those instances, we'll actually locate the ignition system in, let's say, landscape boxes outside of the garden and run everything through conduit and gas line to the fire garden. And we've gotten some pretty cool pictures from those where it's just an area in the backyard where there's just fire, just in a serpentine shape or whatever, mixed in with plants and rocks. And there's so much that you can do with fire. Your imagination's the only limiting factor.
So it's no problem at all to curve the burner from a construction standpoint. You just got to get you the radiuses on the layout of it.
Well, yeah, our burners, we use what's called heat exchange tubing for stuff like this. You can actually bend it in the field. It's not like stainless pipe. It's this tubing you could actually radius yourself. Now, if somebody wants us to radius it, we can. But what's really cool about this is it's pliable, it's easy to work with, and yet it'll stand the test of time. You could hit it with salt water, fire, heat exchanger tubing. The material that they make it out of, I don't know what the material is exactly other than stainless, but I'm sure there's a lot of nickel in it. And chromium maybe, but it's pliable. It's easy to, you got to put some force to it, but you're not going to just do this with your hands. You're going to have to wrap it around something and work with it, but it's real easy to work with. And yes, you can bend it.
One of the things we have in the podcast, we talk about poolside true crime. Is there something that you've seen that's happened, or a project that was just like, I can't believe that happened to an individual?
We talked about natural gas and propane. Natural gas is pretty safe. Propane, you got to treat it differently in that you really have to respect the fact that it's heavier than air, and just like water, it'll pool. It'll pool wherever you allow it to pool, meaning where there's no ventilation. I have seen, probably the first one that really caught my attention, and this really blew me away. This was a propane company in Florida that I won't name their name, but they designed a fire pit, pretty good sized fire pit. Now, when you're dealing with propane, your vent holes have to be at the very bottom of your structure. That way, if there's a leak or propane makes its way down there or whatever, it's going to seep out of the feature. It's not going to build up. Well, they had, for whatever reason, dug down from grade 8 inches, and they built this thing out of block. And then it was propane, and they, so mind you this, it's a fire pit, but the bottom of it's 8 inches below grade, and their vent holes are at grade. So that means the bottom is 8 inches below grade. So they basically, and it was a big table. It was probably 8 foot by 3 foot. So you had an area that was 8 foot by 3 foot by 8 inches deep where propane could pool. And that's exactly what happened. Luckily, nobody got hurt, but a leak developed, and it wasn't in an ignition system. It was something to do with the plumbing. Well, then they went to light it. Luckily, because it was automated, they didn't have to be close by. But when they hit that button to turn it on, it didn't look like a fire pit after that. It looked like a demo site. It blew that thing up. That's a lot of propane. And of course, it turned into a lawsuit, but our install instructions are very clear about venting for propane. There's warnings, cautions, and diagrams and the whole 9 yards about that. And here was a propane company that designed and installed this feature and never even gave a second thought. Had I installed, I don't know why they went down 8 inches, but that 8 inches needed to be filled in, and then they would have been fine. If they would have had the venting that they had at grade, they would have been fine. Never would have had an issue. So, and that was one instance. Another one, again, another propane issue. There was two columns left and right of a spa, concrete columns, and the gas lines came down the columns, and then they wrapped around the spa under the sidewalk, and then went towards the propane tank. So this whole sleeve, and it was just a sleeve, was under the concrete. Within that sleeve was the gas line, the propane gas line. Well, whenever you have a sleeve and you have the propane coming out, you have to seal that sleeve with expanding foam or something. Why? If there's ever a propane leak, you can't let it go. It can't go down the sleeve. Because if it goes down the sleeve, that's just as bad as this first scenario. Well, this person had video cameras that were recording all the time around their house. So I got to see this. And sure enough, somehow propane filled up both sleeves, because I think it went this way and then came up. And all the, when it went off, at first you couldn't see anything. You just saw, smoke. And then when the smoke cleared, there were slabs of concrete in the spa from the sidewalk, and the rest of the sidewalk was gone. But interestingly enough, both of our fire features were still burning, which told me it wasn't our fire features that had anything to do with it. Otherwise, at least one of them would have gone out. So, so that's the thing. We encourage people. Look, if you're not sure how to do this, just call us or email us. Send us your design. We'll try to give you as much help as we can. But propane is not something. I saw a propane tank go through the top of a gazebo because of where it was in this well below the fire pit in concrete. And all of a sudden there was a leak of sorts. And I don't know how, but this propane tank and some debris went up. Why it went up, I don't know. But it put holes in the top of the roof of the gazebo. So if anything else, just give us a call, send us some pictures. We'll help you. We don't charge for it either. We do a lot of design work that we don't even charge for because we know you're going to buy from us if we, design it. So anyway, those are, and there's too many of those stories, unfortunately. We had one instance where it was a natural gas unit, again, a leak in the plumbing, and it ended up, it was a small, I hesitate to use the word explosion, but it was in Vegas, and I decided I want to go see what happened here. And I happened to get there when the Southwest gas guy was there. And we were talking, and I go, man, I hardly see this kind of stuff at all. He goes, oh, we see this all the time with barbecue islands. I'm like, really? He goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I can't tell you how many incidences we go out to a yard and the barbecue island exploded because either there was a gas leak or they left the grill on and then the wind blew the flame out, and now there's natural gas just flowing. The homeowner goes out to start the grill because it's steak night, and boom, there goes the barbecue. And it happens more often than you'd think.
Wow.
Oh,
yeah.
Well ventilated spaces is a key here. I see the theme.
Yes, I'm curious because this was all explosive, but do you have any? Because I'm sure there's landscapers out there that maybe don't work well with like what's going on with or maybe it's landscapers or homeowners or whatever, but with like clearance of the fire and maybe starting actual fires with landscaping or whatever. Have you seen any situations where that's happened?
if I understand the question, you're wondering if landscapers know how to do this. Is that kind of where you're
Well,
alluding?
has anyone managed, like, bought your product, or maybe not even your product, but because the fire gets pretty big in some certain situations, and the fire actually starts a bigger fire that's not controlled, I guess.
Gotcha. You know, in the early days, we used to do that where we didn't have what's called an orifice. Earlier in the podcast, I mentioned everything should have an orifice.
Yep.
Every gas appliance has one. Why? What does an orifice do? Well, if you have a fitting with a little hole in it, it's only going to allow so much gas through it. If you remove that fitting and now you have a 1/2 inch pipe, that's a lot of gas. And that's how we all used to do it in the early days. And then back in 2010, when we introduced our ignition system, I said, you know, every gas appliance has an orifice, but we're the days of the Wild West here with fire features. Everybody, the bigger the flame, the better. And you're right. I've seen bushes catch on fire. Matter of fact, we did a job for some entertainers in Vegas where they wanted fire everywhere. And I'm looking at some of these bushes and I'm telling the maintenance guy, you might want to remove this because this could catch on fire on a windy day. And sure enough, it happened. But anymore, I don't know what other companies are doing, but we put an orifice in there. We don't want a flame any bigger than 12 to 18 inches. So what we've done is with every one of our burners, we've tested it. And we said, okay, what orifice setting will get us that 12 to 18-inch height? And that's what, you know, so every burner ships with an orifice. The orifice for natural gas is different from the ones for LP, for propane. The ones for propane is a very rich fuel. And if you don't add air to it, you'll get the black soot. You'll actually see the black soot coming off the flame while you're looking at the feature. It's wisps of black, but it dirties everything. So with LP, with propane, you use this thing called, it's an orifice, but it's got air holes in it. And as the propane is flowing through the fixture, it draws air in like a vacuum. It's called the Venturi effect. And what it does is it leans out the propane. And not only does it restrict the amount of gas, but it leans it out so that you don't get the black soot and you don't get the wisps of black smoke and stuff like that. So, but every one of our burners goes out. And, you know, we've had people say, hey, I'd like to get a bigger flame. And you just say, well, you know, if you pull out the orifice and drill it out, we recommend you go no bigger than, and we'll give them a size. We'll pull up the invoice, see what orifice is in there, and then we'll give them a drill size. We'll say we recommend no bigger than this for safety reasons. What they ultimately do is totally on them. We can't, you know, stop them.
Yeah.
But, you know, most people just go with the flow because you're not cooking things on these fire features. It's just for ambiance.
Oh, yeah.
S'mores. Lots of s'mores are cooked on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to a job site not too long ago and I thought the glass was melting. It wasn't. It was melted marshmallows all over the glass. So.
Yep, seen that.
Oh, yeah.
Something I always ask every guest is just a couple easy questions just to get to know you a little bit better. So I'm wondering what your favorite movie is, your favorite book, and then also your favorite meal.
And I want to know your favorite trip.
Yeah, he wants to know where you love to go to.
Anyway.
For inspiration.
You know, because of my background as a pilot, when I was younger, I always dreamt of possibly being an astronaut. So that's an easy one. Apollo 13.
Okay, that's a good one.
Loved that movie. I can't tell you how many times I've watched it because I'm living vicariously through the movie. You know, this is what it would have been like. Just a great one. You know, as far as a favorite book, there's just so many good ones out there. You know, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a great one.
Classic.
I reference it quite a bit in my own business. I'll read through sections of it time and again. That's a great one. Favorite meal, I have to say, my wife's pot roast is amazing. So if I said anything other than that, and if she's in earshot, then I have to get in trouble. So let's just stick with that. And then what was the last question you had, Mike? What my favorite
trip?
Favorite trip.
Where do you go to, where is your favorite place to go?
My wife and I went to Italy. We had a great time. That was probably, I mean, we flew first class there and back. And, it was funny when I was a pilot with United, we used to be able to fly standby. And we'd go to Maui and we'd go to different places. One year I took my youngest daughter to Auckland, New Zealand with me. Those were the days where you can actually bring them up in the cockpit. That was pretty cool. And she was very young, probably 90, 98, 99. So she was maybe 10. But it was funny about that was, when you fly standby, you got to have an open seat. Well, it turns out the return flight, we didn't have an open seat because earlier flight had canceled or something. So the flight was completely full. I'm not leaving my 10-year-old daughter by herself in Auckland, New Zealand. So I bought her a discounted ticket through Air New Zealand. And I met the crew, I met the flight attendants. Everybody was wonderful. I said, I'm trusting my daughter in your hands. And that aircraft took off just before ours, headed to, I think we were going to LA. And it was pretty cool because somewhere in there, we got a call. You all monitor the same frequency when you're going over the Pacific or the Atlantic. And all of a sudden, we get a call from the Air New Zealand flight. We were in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And he said, is First Officer Roman there? And of course I was. I was in the cockpit. I said, yeah. Somebody wants to talk to you. And so they put the headset on her and, hi, Daddy, we were talking and it was awesome. You're not supposed to do that on that frequency, but we're in the middle of nowhere. So who cares? But that was a fun trip also because it was a chance for her to see something totally different from Las Vegas.
Yeah. Awesome.
So. Yeah, it was good times. The time at United was good, but I was glad to leave, and I'm much happier where I am because I love to create, I love to build, and the problem with airline flying is it's kind of boring once you get up to cruise altitude. There's nothing to do but watch the airplane do its thing.
Yeah. Well, we greatly appreciate you coming on and sharing. It was great information for homeowners to have an idea going in on what good things they can have in their backyard versus just what everybody else gives them. So thank you so much for your information. So is there a best way to reach out to your company if someone was wanting to get a custom design or something like that?
We have a website like everybody does, firebydesign.com. I will say this, that when it comes to, because we're dealing with fire, we'll work with homeowners as far as design goes and things like that. But ultimately, when it comes to the purchasing of the product, we make a requirement that we work through your contractor. And that's really, we had an incident many years ago where the homeowner was the go-between. They didn't want us to talk to the contractor for whatever reason. And nobody got hurt, but it didn't work out the way it could have. Nothing even got damaged. It just was a lot of headache for the contractor. And finally, after that, I said, we can't do this. We have to deal directly with the contractor. We'll work with homeowners for the design.
Right.
And then at some point you say, okay, I need to talk to your contractor.
Yeah.
And we've had to tell people, sorry, we're not going to generate an invoice for you for liability reasons, safety reasons, whatever you want to call it, because we're dealing with fire.
Yeah.
They understand it. You get those people that they'll call back, and if somebody else answers, they're, oh yeah, I'm a contractor. Oh, okay. Well, what's your gas pressure and water column? They're like, there's no water in my gas. Okay, yeah. Well, once you have your contractor calls back.
Before you leave, I'm curious. Do you like the aftermarket fire pits, or is that because I feel like we had one for my future mother-in-law, and I was like, my fiance bought this from Amazon. This is so sketchy. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that whole situation?
You know, it's one of those things where when I used to do installs, I would get homeowners asking me, "Hey, can you take a look at the fire pit up on my patio, my second floor patio?"
Yeah.
And oftentimes it was those kind of kits that you're talking about. Um, the bottom line is, as long as it doesn't leak gas, I think they're okay. The problem is you don't know who tightened the fittings, and do homeowners think enough to check the fittings, or grab a spray bottle with soapy water and soapy water and spray the joints to see, is it leaking? And that's exactly the first instance where he says, "Yeah, I smell gas." It was just a matter of grabbing an adjustable wrench and tightening something down. But you don't, with it in transit, and you don't know who tightened it or whatever.
Yep.
That's the only concern that I have. And again, propane is a scary one, but you can have incidences with natural gas. So I think a lot of it has to do with the brand. There's some great brands out there, but even then, when they're shipping from wherever they're shipping from, I don't think I've ever seen instructions that say, "Hey, make sure everything's tight."
No, nothing. It's just put it together and you're good to go. That's
just hook up a propane tank and hit on, and you're good to go. And
that's great information.
there is a company called OW Lee that they're a U.S. based company. They're out of actually San Antonio. They used to be out of California. They make some really nice stuff.
Okay.
I would say they're top of the industry, OW Lee, and they're sold in a lot of stores across the United States. So they're not cheap, but they're high quality and very, very nice stuff. Matter of fact, I haven't done it yet, but once our battery powered system is certified, I'll be reaching out to them, because they don't offer an ignition system, and everything they offer comes with a propane tank, and you don't have to run power to it. So we're believing that once they see our battery powered system, they'll want to incorporate it for those people who want automation and don't want to light it by hand.
Well, thanks again, Bob. And
well, thanks for having me. I appreciate
it. Well,
it was fun. Yeah. Firebydesign.com, and we're here to help.
We'll see you around.
All right. Okay. Take care, guys.
Well, I'm fired up.
Yeah. There's a lot of information in there that I'm going to take home. That was, wow. What a pool of information.
Well, it's one of the key elements in most projects today is people love things that are beautiful, and fire's a heavy component that I would say over half the people consider as a must-have situation. And he's given the keys to having your must-have perform well, which isn't always the case.
No. And yeah, fire's been around since fire, man discovered fire. So it's deep into our DNA. So that's why we love it so much, and be able to merge things like the blue mind theory and aspects of fire and bring it all together, and have someone that does custom work like he does. You touched on it briefly, but there's a lot of the mechanisms he has are not flat. They're rounded around something. It's just he said the limit is your imagination, which is 100% true when it comes to this product.
Well, and I think this is going to offer a lot of inspiration for people to check out some other things and get a little bit outside the box, like Dragon's Breath.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of homeowners, they want to have fire because obviously it creates that another level of vibe, especially at nighttime. It's more immersive, but
it's the ambience it creates.
Yeah, exactly. But being able to have something that's different. Everyone wants to have something that's different. They want it to be unique to their backyard. So,
and bowls have been done
for 20 years, which is relatively new. But ever since I've been around you and you doing everything, I'm only 28, so 8 years old, I was running around, and they were, fire bowls were discovered, I guess.
Oh, I've discussed.
Or 27. I always forget my age.
Well, you'll be 28 in a couple days.
Yeah.
So by the time this episode comes out, you'll be 28.
I guess so.
Yeah. But it's just, there's lots of inspiration here that you can look at to, up your game, or if you're a homeowner looking at stuff, get, some creative things done that also work well. So, I mean, the idea of fire in water is definitely less than 20 years old.
It's a foreign aspect to a lot of people.
Yeah. So I remember talking about it years ago, and people were like, absolutely not. It's not even possible. And now that's been a thing for quite a while.
Yeah. The only time I saw it before was like seeing oil fires in the ocean, or like watching Game of Thrones and seeing the green wildfire. So to have it manipulated and captured and controlled is a thing of beauty.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this helps everybody, and we'll have some more fun stuff coming up.
Sounds good. See y'all later.
Take care.